All right, so welcome everyone. Again, today's session is on reporting, the functionality within ARM for reporting. So we'll kind of go popcorn style through the different functions and features. We'll give kind of a baseline overview of how to use it if you hadn't before, and then we'll kind of go around and show some tricks and things you can do and utilize there within ARM. Like I said, definitely if you have questions, feel free throughout the session, especially since we are not really running through a very strictly defined workflow, but kind of popping around. Definitely opens the door for questions and things of what can this do, or I need it to do this type of thing, is it possible, etc. So, all right. So here in my ARM, I just have a nondescript trial that's open here. We actually used it last week when we were showing off the labels for whatever that's worth. And so in order to print reports, we will go to the File menu. We have the little printer icon here for print reports. So a basic overview of how this works here on the print reports dialog. On the left is the list of available reports. So this is a selection of different templates, essentially, structured reports that ARM can generate for the particular trial or protocol that you have open. So there's a lot fewer protocol reports than a trial. So that's kind of why I opened up a trial, but a whole host of different things that we can generate. Some of them are just basically, spitting out what you have in the trial. Something like your trial treatments report is just giving you the table of treatments as you've entered them in, or, the site description form will do the same thing for your site description section. So we have the kind of the classic reporting functionality, if you will, of what is in this file, and now I want to put it in a nice report and create a file from that. But we do also have what I would call kind of tools. So not just spitting out what you have, but actually generating something that a trialist could use. And so we covered one of them last week in our labels webinar that we did. There's a data collection sheet. If I cheat over here and look at the report preview, that's just a big open spreadsheet with your randomization. That would be easy to print out and just hand write if you're taking notes in the field. And what goes with that is your data verification that basically prints the exact same layout, but includes the data you have filled in. So that way, if you took your notes on paper, you sat down and typed them into the computer, you could generate this report and set it right next to your handwritten copy and go line by line to make sure you didn't miss any entry. So there's tools kind of like that. There's a spray seeding plan that will generate and calculate the amount of product you need to measure to make an application, things like that. So kind of two different types of reports that that we can create here in ARM. So I like to think of this kind of as the menu of all the different choices we have. And then moving to the right, at the top, we have report set. And this would be the components that I have chosen. So if you're at a restaurant, it's the first course, second course, dessert, whatever you're choosing for this particular time. And so I have several items already in my list. I can clear them out because maybe they were from last time, and I can start over. And so maybe I want to see my trial treatments. You can go on the left in the available reports and just click the add button, and that will put that component into the list of items I want to include in this printout that I'm about to create. Maybe I'll also include the site description as well, and maybe the assessment data summary, which is the kind of the simplest way to spit out the data that you've entered. So we just continue to add those. You can also double click. If I was going to include the status report as well, double clicking will put it in this list. If you want a different order, you say, well, shoot, I kind of wanted that status report as the very first item. If you hold the Shift key down on your keyboard and then press the up or down arrow while you're in this box, that will move the selected report up or down. So that status report, maybe I want it second in line. I can move it instead of having to remove everything and add them back. So we're basically building a list of different components that we're going to combine together into a printout, is essentially what we're achieving here. And you'll notice when I click on one of these names, in the middle panel here, we have report options that load. So this is our way of being able to customize what is going to be on the report, or maybe how it's going to be presented, things like that. So for something like the assessment data summary, pretty short, but we can choose how we want subsamples to be shown on the report, whether or not we want a plot number to be listed in the report. So you just can toggle things on and off as you may want them to. There's also in the corner, there are more options. So you can see that there might not be just one page of options, but there might be a variety of them. And so we'll kind of see some more of those examples of those later on. Sometimes there's a little more for the configuration of each component. But as we just click to different ones, then the options will load. Some of them might not have any options available. I think I managed to find 2 of them right here in this list. So in the trial treatments, we could change what we would want to see or not. So to maybe visualize kind of what we have built here then, once you've kind of gotten that list of components the way you want, we have seen the report preview. If we click on that, it will preview the report that we have selected. So we get a kind of a quick glance on a piece of paper, what this will look like. As you can see in this case, it's just the list of treatments in my trial. It's a pretty short, kind of the rest of the page is going to end up blank. And I can certainly go through and view how all of these reports will end up looking. This is a little longer. It's showing all of those different sections in the trial being displayed here for us in a report, etc. One nice handy use for that report preview that we kind of previewed a minute ago was, if you're not quite sure what one of these reports on the left is, as you're trying to build out your report set, simply clicking on one of them while you have that report preview turned on, then you can get a nice glimpse of what that report's going to look like. So that's the tour report, the audit trail. Guess that doesn't apply for the trial I've got here. Trial comments is empty, so you can click through and see what they might look like and whether they'd be of use in your report or not. We did the same thing with labels as well. Really handy to see the labels that ARM has available. So if we're kind of liking what we've built here, this list of 4 of the components to combine together, then we can press the next button. And there may or may not be some prompting depending on what our options are. Sometimes there's certain tools or selection boxes that might come up to ask us, what treatments are we going to want in a particular report, or choose the assessment columns that you want to analyze, things like that. In my case here, we didn't have any of that, just based on the reports I had selected and the options within. So eventually, you'll end up here at this print dialog. So we've kind of prepared them, we've combined those reports together, And there's a variety of options, and we'll go through a couple of these. But first, I want to just click the preview button over here on the right, and this will just show what we've actually created. So we have a document here that has been created. This is our trial treatments combined with, and on the next page, we have our status report. And then the next page is the site description. Looks like there might be a few of them and then the assessment data summary. So those 4 components that we chose are just kind of combined together, all as one cohesive document. And you'll notice that maybe we're not super efficient. There's a lot of blank space on some of these shorter reports. So a common function, if we close this preview, is you'll find on this print dialog, there's an option to remove that page break. So if my report components are pretty small and short, I'd like to condense my report down to save some paper. If I turn that on and then preview, you'll notice we've saved a couple pages of paper. Now, as soon as that treatment report is finished, we start with that next status report page. So that just immediately started on that same page. And in fact, we were able to squeeze in a section of our site description. So now page 2 here, we're already on our site description report. And now we only have 4 pages instead of 6. So that can be a nice option to condense things down, or going the other direction. Kind of a common question we get in support sometimes too is, how come my report's so squished? It's getting to be a jumbled mess. And so then you can always find that option here and turn it off. So kind of depending on what you're trying to get to, sometimes that's more of a burden than it is a feature, just depending on how things are laid out for your report. But you have the typical selections here for your orientation of how the page should go, and your page order, things like that are all available to kind of set the table, if you will, for that, how that report will be laid out. Right now, I don't have like a real printer connected here to my computer, but this would be listing whichever printer that is your default printer in Windows, and you would just be able to send that document right to your printer. Or potentially, if you wanted to, there are options down below here. Instead of sending it right to a printer, we can create a file for that document that we just saw and save the contents of that to a file. And so we have options for creating an Excel workbook, a Word document, a PDF, or there's some miscellaneous files. I don't think there's a lot there that's super useful. These are kind of the big 3 options here that we can choose. And just to give a quick overview of those options, they really do come in handy to save some of this output as a file, that can be used elsewhere. And so just kind of running down those 3 options. So sending it out to Excel really puts that information in a spreadsheet. It's the downside to that being a spreadsheet is it rarely looks like it did on the screen. So none of the spacing, a lot of the formatting kind of gets lost when suddenly you're trying to shove that information into a grid. Never quite looks the same, but on the flip side, it's really nice being in Excel if you're doing anything with the data that's there. So we had that assessment data summary report that kind of gives a listing of all of the plot data that we had. That might be handy to send out to Excel because now that data is there just in Excel and easy to manipulate or use in a graph or what have you. So that's the reasons for using Excel. Kind of maybe if you're stretching the bounds of reporting, not really want a report, but more about accessing some of the data. That's one route. The word processor sending it out to Microsoft Word typically, that gets fairly close to what you see on the screen. It's really handy if you have, additional edits, additional processing you might want to do to the report after it comes out of ARM. Word is really nice, easy to work with to continue to manipulate, change formatting, things like that. It's also easy to combine with another company documents. I've seen people who have kind of a general template where they've got the master page, the front page or whatever, and then they can just take that ARM report and just put all those pages in the middle, and then they've got summaries or graphs or whatever, and it's easy to kind of combine those two together with ease. So that's the positive for printing out to Word. It's not 100% perfect. With the formatting, sometimes there's some quirks and just the way that Word will do margins and things like that. But normally, what you see in Word is pretty darn close to what we saw on that preview. But that takes us to the PDF, which is really the best match to what you see in the preview. It's pretty much always exactly what ARM intended, if you will. That it really gets it exactly the same. The downside with that is having limited editing options. PDFs just aren't as easy to edit as Word, depending on how savvy you are with Adobe at least. But for sure, it's just a little less easy to work with than Word, but you definitely see exactly what you had in the preview. The formatting is always spot on. So kind of a range of options for you. And those all just correspond again to this print to. There's a couple of options here depending on which one you might be printing to. Kind of rare to change these unless there's a particular problem or goal that you have. But then to the right here, you would just print to, maybe I'll generate a PDF here just to kind of demonstrate that. And so this saved that document that we were viewing. It actually created a PDF document. Like we were mentioning, it looks identical to what we saw in the preview. Whereas if we were to print out to like Excel or something here, we'll notice pretty quickly that it doesn't quite have the same appearance. It is handy that each report is on its own tab, so that can be useful. But like the header just doesn't quite look the same. This table here is pretty close. But the nice thing naturally is now you've got the data here. I could make a graph or something like that. So those are the output types. And the different options for those. All right, I'm going to close and we'll just go right back into the print reports. So that's kind of a general look, general overview of the reporting process. So once you kind of have those reports the way you want them, of course, we could come back and change some options if there wasn't something that was quite right, and then just proceed and press next and generate the report again to match what we need. But once we have things pretty nicely locked down, it would be nice to have ARM remember what we did. It remembered it right now. So if I closed ARM and came back tomorrow, it certainly will still have the same selection, but maybe tomorrow I have a different task I need to do. And so I'll have to generate something else. You can save, kind of pretty much create a bookmark, if you will, of this configuration we have, the list of reports that we have chosen, as well as all of the options within those reports that we have chosen. We can bundle those all together into a file that we can then use again and again. and that's called a report set. So part of why we chose the name here on the title, we can actually save this to a file to be able to be used again. So to do that, we have a button over here on the right to save set. As I mentioned again, we're saving that configuration of these 4 report components, if you will, and all of the options that we chose within there, and really kind of bookmarking those for us to use again later. So I'm going to give this a name. Mine is very boring, but a good trick would be to name this so you remember what it is later on. Maybe it's final trial summary. Maybe it's the spray sheet. Maybe it's the particular label I'm generating. Whatever task it is you're doing at the time is probably a good thing to name it. So that way then in the future, when you are doing that task, you can see the name of that task right in the report set list and you can choose it. And it's saving it just to our computer. If you've been in any of our other webinars, you probably ran into this folder. This is kind of the spot where ARM saves all of these files that we can create to kind of standardize ourselves in ARM. So I'm going to press save. ARM lets us be a little more verbose if we want, have just a description to define what this set is. This we can see again later when we load a report set to kind of remind ourselves, what this set does. So I'm going to be rhetorical in this case, but you would maybe want to describe what the goal was or what you were doing when you created this to remind your future self later really what it was. So when I said okay, there was kind of 2 important changes here on the screen. First one at the top is the report set now has a name. So we've given this a name of this configuration that we have. And also in this list of available sets, we now have our name there. So the nice thing is, like we said, maybe tomorrow comes, we've got a different job to do. So I clear out my list. I'm making, we got to go spray a different trial. So we create our spray seeding plan and we go next. And yeah, we got to choose our applications and, maybe we print this out, whatever. Then we come back to do another summary here, maybe next week. Oh, well, what was it I chose? All we have to do is in that list of available sets, find the name of that set we created and just click on it. And it immediately puts back our selections, those components, as well as the options, the way that they were. So that way we can just immediately generate essentially the same report that we did a week ago or a month ago or last year. So that's the report set. One of the nice reasons that I like to kind of show that folder. I'm going to click this more sets button. This would be a way to see the files here again at that location. That's just on my computer. It's just kind of the spot ARM uses to save these files, and there is that set. And again, that text description that we put in here is here. So you kind of click through some of these to see what, and then that description will change to remind ourselves what we might want to load. But the nice thing with these files is there's nothing really magical about them. They're very small and they can easily be shared as well. So not only is this handy for me to do the same thing again as I did last week or last year when I was generating reports, but I could just as well share this with a colleague. And now suddenly our whole group, we can all be generating final reports with the same styling, the same choices. We can all be doing the spray seeding plans with the same options and setup that the group knows what we want. It's just a matter of, you can go out to that folder and find that .set file and drop it in an email, and someone else can copy to their folder, and now they can load it as well and have that same standard process and settings for creating a report. So that's the report set, really, kind of automating, saving you some time to be able to do that again and again. And certainly then when you're on a different task, like we said, we cleared that out. I had the spray seeding plan. Then you simply can save another set and just give it a totally different name. This is my spray plan. And maybe I put a year on it, so I remember next year that if I need to make any changes, I could give it a new name, things like that. These, you can create as many of these as you need. The other trick I like to show, because hopefully you're seeing the benefit of that, but you might be kicking yourself a little bit if you were like, well, I wish I knew that last year when I made that really nice report, and now I have no hopes of remembering what I did. I wish I knew to create a set. ARM actually kind of silently creates, tries to remember what report settings you had used in the past. So there's this previous sets option here. It's right underneath the more sets in this list of available sets. And previous sets will show a list of the different report settings that you've created. So each time you press next and move to the next screen to kind of generate a report, ARM saves not the report itself, but just the options. So just like we talked about with the report set here, it basically is creating a report set behind the scenes as well, whether or not it has a name. So here I had a report set that I had loaded and gave it a name. And so it remembered that was what I had done. All of the rest of these, I never did save it. I never gave it a name. I just, chose particular, a particular configuration, particular reports, and created something. So the benefit here now is you could easily scroll down. We've got the date last used, so I could go back to the spring or back to the fall. Say, all right, yeah, last September I was making, really nice. I had all my stats chosen. I remember having to wade through all those options to figure out what I needed, and you can find that very same report set that you had chosen and load that, and it will put your settings just the way you had them at that point in time, essentially. And of course, now, if it looks like this, actually, I did have a report set name, but maybe at that point in time, you hadn't created a report set yet, this would be a great time, load that in, and now let's give it a name so that way I don't have to do this the next time around. So again, that was the previous sets, and that's just doing that kind of automatically when you're reporting. So a nice way to kind of recover and go back in time, essentially, to be able to create those report sets for you if you've been generating reports previously. All right. So that's a good overview, I think, of the workflow for reports, and then also kind of the number one function for standardizing, which would be creating that report set to be able to replicate what you had done. Maybe we'll just kind of dive in to some significant options, I guess we'll call them, kind of common ones that people usually are looking for, or are asking if ARM is able to do this, that, or the other, and they usually kind of lead us to some of these options. So right now I've got the AOV means table. That's kind of probably the most popular report of this whole list. That's in the summary. That really has the treatment means and the mean comparisons, all the statistics stuff. We won't do any of the statistics stuff today, but it's a good example because it hits on most of the common things that we want to show. And one of them we clicked on once already. That's the more options. So here on the screen right now is just kind of the first page of those options, but of all of the reports, I think this one has the most. So if we click on report options, we see kind of the same list, the first page of the options, but there are quite a few other tabs and sections for us. And so one of them, I guess there's four of them now that are called global options. You can get to them either through the more options, and we also have a shortcut button up here for global report settings. Either one will get you there. In fact, I might click on this just because it'll show us just those four. So these settings apply to all of the reports that you might have chosen. So the global term just kind of say this is overarching across all of them. You don't really change these for each individual component, and they really do apply to all of them. So things like treatments, just about every report somehow is dealing with treatments. And this is a popular one, especially this time of year or this time of season when we're doing summaries. If there's some reason that a treatment needs to be thrown out entirely, I want to focus my analysis on just these 4 treatments out of this trial because the other one isn't valid or whatever. Changing this treatments to print selected, then when we press next here, ARM will ask which treatments should be included in this report. If we're doing a statistical report like this, it's really dropping out all those other data values, or really any other report. It'll just simply act as if that treatment was never even here, just in the reporting creation, which is nice. So you're not deleting any information out, but you're just not utilizing it in a given report. So that's a common one. I'm looking for that selection of treatments. It's also handy, not necessarily to drop them out, but to change their order. So if maybe I'll do that. Let's do the print selected here, say okay, and let's not do the AOV means table just because there's a lot there. Let's just do the trial treatments. Again, the global setting still applies because it applies to no matter whatever settings we have. Now, when I press next, ARM is going to ask, which treatment numbers do you want to include? And it shows us the list, so we can actually click on the ones we want. Or down below, you can see that there's a numbering here. So if I wanted to just not have number 1 present, we could do 2 through 5. Or if we wanted to change the order, maybe for whatever reason, I want to go in descending order. So I'm going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Whatever purpose you may have for that. Now, when I click OK, let's just preview on the screen quick to see that it actually changed the order of the treatments on the report. So that can be handy to drop treatments out or just change the order of how how they typically are on there. Bunch of options, not necessarily all of them are super important, but depending on what you're looking for, can be handy. And that's probably a good time to point out the help button. So there's a help button on the corner of each of these screens, and it's context sensitive in that it knows what page you're looking at and will give you a write-up that will include each option, and each sub option even will describe what does it do if you turn this on or if you turn this off. What is it doing? What is it going to change on the report? And so that's for every page. Sometimes there'll be links here. We can look at the page heading tab. Some of them have a little GDM recommends to say, well, hey, this is typically done. Most people want this on, or most people want it off, or what have you, to give some guidance as to why you might want to choose it. So that can be helpful to kind of wade through. There's a lot of options there. If you're looking for, can it do something in particular? There's also a search that might help you find things. That does search across the entire help system. So it's not just the reporting, but it's everything in ARM. But that can be helpful to track things down. Looking at the page heading. So these options control kind of the very top of your report. So here we just kind of have like a miniature preview just to see kind of what we're doing. It's probably very small. I'll try to zoom in, although now we can't see the entire thing. So we'll try to make do, but it's really this top line, and you can control what should be displayed and where it goes within that line. So here I've got the date printed left. Maybe I want this on the right instead. So this will then move that component all the way over to the right corner instead. If I want to turn off the page number entirely, that'll take that away from the heading there. So now it's not in the middle at all. So you can control what is put on there and where it should belong. One handy function is to include a logo. So you can include a logo on your report. You would turn it on and choose where should it be. Maybe I want centered, but you need to click this button here to choose a logo file. Of course, I need to find my pictures here, and I'll just grab our icon here for the LMS as it happens to be. It's very large at first, but we have buttons here to control the size. So that particular image file obviously was very large. It wasn't very sized appropriately. I could have sized it first perhaps and saved it, or here we can kind of shrink it down to something a little more manageable. Oops, there, and it's in the middle. I could certainly put it on the left if I want, or wherever it should go. Oops, the logo to the left there. So anyway, that's a common function people like. Just adds a nice look to the report, really. If I zoom back out now, having that company logo can really make things look nice. And again, that will be included if you save your set. So that's helpful as well. So you're doing that work once instead of over and over again. Borders to kind of control how different tables will look. And if you're using the signature functionality in a trial, you can have a page with those trial signatures. So those are the global settings. They apply to all of these reports. Doesn't matter what you've chosen, it'll really apply to all of them. Kind of one level down from that, I guess we could say, back when we were looking at the AOV means table, here in the more options, we had a bunch of sections. One of them is called general summary. So this one, it isn't global like the others that applies to all of the reports, but you will see this section on any of these reports here in this kind of sub list under the summary heading. So there's the assessment data summary that we had talked about. When you choose one of these, it'll also have the little symbol next to it, just kind of show that it's one of these summary reports. And so all of them have this general summary report section to them. And it's just options again that apply to really any of those types of reports, which most typically deal with the assessment data section. And so that's kind of the theme here that we see on the general summary. And so we have functions kind of similar to what we did with the treatments, where now we're also looking at the assessment columns, you know, the ratings that we took. It would be nice to maybe select which ones I want. So this assessment data columns option found in the general summary can change what columns are included by default on the report. So automatic will just include any data column that has data should be in the report. And I'll just put it in the order that ARM has it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's that. Nice and easy to have automatic. All will give you all of the columns, whether or not they have any data, and then select, much like we did with the treatments. ARM will pop open the assessment screen, and you can click on which assessments you want to include in the printout or in the analysis. We kind of give the hint that that's a great way to change the order as well. So you're not limited to the order that they were filled in. Really, these same options also exist for the assessment data header rows. I think, nope, let me close this. We'll just look at the assessment data screen. That header is this top half. So the different rows that you use to describe the assessment or document different aspects at the time of assessment, you can control which of those are included. That's the assessment data header row section here. Same thing, automatic will just, if it gets used, then it's on the report, but select would allow me to hand choose which ones get included and in what order. There's also a current view for both of these. Don't really have time to show all of the functionality there, but there is a good number of view options on this screen. So for the assessment data, just when you're using the assessment data editor, you can control here from the properties, there's the view options. You can change how the columns are sorted or filtered on the screen. And actually then that can pass on right to your reporting as well. We could spend probably almost a whole hour on that topic alone, but just to kind of hint at that, if you've ever used the view options to change what you're looking at or the order things are looked at on the screen, then you can use that exact same system basically in your print reports. And it would just be to have that current view as either the header rows or the assessment data columns. Can be pretty powerful. I'll just set those back to automatic because that's the easiest one. Got a little more time here. I guess I'll just highlight a couple more common options that are helpful. One common question when working with data reports is the number of decimals on the report, especially if you're doing transformations, things like that, calculations. You end up with a bunch of decimals that maybe ultimately end up being too much in the report, and it's actually on the general summary options. There is an option that you can force the number of decimals of accuracy. So maybe I only want 1 decimal of accuracy. I don't remember. It does look like I have some calculations here. So column 3 has a couple of digits there. So we should see, even if I just preview here on the screen. Oh, yep. I'm getting ahead of myself. We would have truncated that because we put a 1 here. However, ARM is ignoring my instruction because of the other spot. There's really 2 places you can choose how many decimals you see. So you can go column by column, and there's a number of decimals row in that assessment header that you can give instructions to ARM of how many decimals should you use. So this trial already has instructions to use 2 decimal places for all of the assessments. So I've kind of circumvented myself, if you will, on that report option because the column by column kind of takes precedence. So let me go back here and just remove those instructions on at least some of these. There we can see that there's a square root function, so you end up with just an obnoxious number of decimals that very quickly lose their meaning. And that general summary, just to show if I don't have that on, then that report preview, zoom out a little bit, is pretty ugly. Depending on what calculation you're doing, you get a lot of decimals. And so, of course, you could just put that number of decimals in that column, or if you want it across the entire report, maybe I'll set this to 1 now, and we can see that each value now has down to just 1 decimal place. Except for the ones that I still have 2 in. So, so that's controlling the number of decimals. Yeah, we showed how to do data columns and header rows and treatments. There is one last chunk of a trial that you could potentially want to exclude, and that would be a whole replicate. Hopefully you're not finding yourself in that situation. Probably not a great situation to be in, but if for some reason, especially analysis wise, if you need to throw out a replicate so it's not included in the analysis, again, you'll find it on the general summary options, but it's the very last one in the list, print selected replicates. And it's just like the treatments that we've seen already. If we turn that on, then when we go to generate our report, I still have the treatments on, so it's still asking us about that, and then it remembered our last selection. But now it'll also ask for replicate numbers. So that's over here, and I could click on particular data rows, or I could type it in. Here in this trial, I've got 4 replicates. So we'll just say maybe for some reason, replicate 3, something went wrong. We can't include that data. Then the analysis, not that I paid any attention to what the numbers were, but I guess we can see here, since it's the assessment data summary, actually, that literally that 3rd replicate is just not even there. So our treatment means are different based only on the 3 replicates instead of the 4 it's as if that replicate didn't even exist, more or less. Again, just for the report, which is nice. We don't actually have to delete whatever it was we recorded about that replicate. Yeah, I think that covers at least the most common options. Like I said, it's you know, this time of year especially, in support, we get a lot of questions, and it's really great to hear them of, you know, I have this need. Is it possible for ARM to do this thing? Those are kind of my favorite questions to ask, because at least as long as I have an answer, I know we have an option in ARM somewhere. It's really great to get to answer those, because then you can see that value ARM can provide. There's tons of options, as you see. You know, there's tons of reports, and every report has a bunch of different options within them. You know, don't feel bad for not remembering where an option is or not being able to find one. You know, I sit in these options every day, helping people find them and working with them. So I'm pretty good at finding the ones. You know, the researchers got 1,000 other things to worry about than where's an option on what screen in ARM. So that's why I like to tell people, at least. That's why we're here, for support, and your local rep. Most of you, I would imagine, probably Melissa, there to answer that question for you. So those questions are never too small, most especially kind of a high pressure time frame. If you guys are in any similar boat to the researchers here in our neck of the woods, where it's reporting season and things get hectic.
Matt, it's Brad here.
Hi.
Quick question: printing AOV means table into Excel, when we have multiple products per treatment, so we've got multiple lines per treatment number, is there a way when we're printing into Excel, instead, because at the moment it comes out treatment 1, and then you'll have 3 lines for each, or say there's 3 products, is there a way of deleting those multiple lines, or making it print into columns or rows, I mean, instead of
Yeah, there's a couple of options. That's a very common question. I think especially depending on the type of research you have, it just that list gets very long. We don't have the smoothest option ever, but the one workaround I know of to get this down, you know, here my treatment 5 is the only one that's in that boat, but to get that down so it's one row, really the trick is to go into the options, the fields to print. So this is how we can choose what treatment fields, you know, treatment columns to include. And if I hide all of them except the treatment number, for some reason I don't see the little checkbox. There's supposed to be a checkbox here, but I don't know if my screen settings are a little weird when I'm presenting. Hopefully it'll do what I want it to. If you have just treatment numbers, the only component of the treatment to print out, crossing my fingers it works, yep, then it'll only do 1 row, no matter how many components you have for that treatment. So that's one kind of hack. Of course, you don't get any of the other information about the treatment, but depending on your use, that'd be one way to get that down to something a little more manageable. Another option, just depending on what that final format is, and like you mentioned, maybe this column by column isn't super ideal for whatever else you might be using with it. Instead of in this report section, we do have a data export. So under File, you can export study and create a data export. And so this would generate a CSV file, which is you know, typical for like Excel as well. Excel reads those just fine, but you could also have, you know, R or SAS, or, you know, their stats program is pretty good at reading things like that. And so that you can generate. And depending on what treatment information you want, maybe I'll just take my first line here, plot means, just to show what this will end up being then. Basically, we'll just generate out the, I'm just going to drop this on my desktop so it's easy to find, a CSV file of the data. And here I can choose which columns to export. If I leave it blank, it'll grab all of them, which is what I'd want to do. Treatment fields to export. I still don't see my checkbox. I'll just hope that it picks some of these for me, whichever parts I want. And then header line numbers. I bet we'll probably want pest, crop, just the bare minimum at least, just to demonstrate this. But it'll generate this CSV file, which then open right in Excel. So then it'll have kind of row by row now the different assessment columns, and this would just be your plot mean. If you had subsamples, I think it gives it the plot mean instead of the individual subsample values, but I'm not totally sure. But each column you have then kind of itemized for you, again, just ready to put into another program. So depending on your target, maybe that might be helpful as well. But
yeah, okay, thanks, Matt.
Yeah, great question.
It'd be really handy if you could tick like a box. So instead of having them one underneath, you could have like column A, column B, column C, where like you. So as you're adding more products to that treatment, or even timings like A, B, and C, you'd have them in like columns A, B, and C rather than down in rows. If that was ever possible, that'd be very handy.
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of a common question of how to get those treatments just right. And I think we're making some progress in the next update here in a week or two. There'll be a new column in the treatments editor. I don't have the test version here, but it's called like core component. So it's just a yes, no field. So that'd be another way where you can specify specific which rows really matter and which rows don't. And I think eventually we might hook that up to the reporting as well, to let you pick which row matters to you and which ones don't. But yeah, I like your suggestion too of just trying to format that differently. So you still get the information there so you don't lose it all, but it's accessible, easy to manipulate in another program as well.
Yeah, thanks very much, Matt.
Yeah. Well, great question. And we have reached the end of our time. I do have a minute or two that I could stick around if there were any other questions, but don't want to hold anyone hostage either. So appreciate you all joining us today for this session, and for those of you that have been each week. It's been great to hold these sessions, slightly different time frame, but a real great to spread to another section of the world and give people a chance to see it. So again, thanks everyone. If you have any questions, send it on, or of course, you can always get a hold of Melissa if you think of them later. We're here to support you. If you're having problems or ideas like Brad's idea, that's helpful to hear. What things you need to be helpful. That's our goal for ARM, is to provide the tools that you guys need, and the only way we can do that is to hear about it. So, all right. Well, thanks again, everybody, and have a good day.
Yeah, thank you.